Don't you just love how the NCAA always finds a way to screw over USC?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Hulkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching me on YouTube or wherever you like to download your podcast, we are free, and I really do appreciate your support. And you can show your appreciation for the show, and it means a lot. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, become a subscriber, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you pound that thumbs up all the time. And because I don't want you to miss an episode, hit that bell notification button. That way you don't miss one of our 5 episodes that comes at you Monday through Friday. Look, one of these days, I'm really hoping that a representative from USC just gets out of their chair and says something off the cuff just to get the NCAA's attention. In other words, I want somebody from USC to push back on the bully. In case you haven't heard, last week, late, the NCAA's Committee on Infractions, basically, they are the gift that just keeps on giving to the Southeastern Conference. I mean, heck, if I were an SEC member, I would probably be doing everything in my power to keep that organization together. They do everything they can to bend over backwards for the SEC teams. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you, when you can break hundreds of rules, when football coaches can voluntarily deliver McDonald's Happy Meal bags filled with cash, not to one, not to two, but to multiple players? I mean, heck, the University of Tennessee even admitted to cheating by providing houses, cars, and employment to existing current players and their families. Yeah, you'll understand why there's a lot of vitriol behind my voice right now. So last July, 2022, University of Tennessee, they received a notice of allegations regarding 18 violations against their football program during then head coach Jeremy Pruitt. It included an allegation of $60,000 in cash or gifts given to football recruits or players by Coach Pruitt himself, his wife, numerous coaches on the staff, as well as boosters. That's what they admitted to. And these are not minor violations. All of those violations are what's called level 1. And they're considered the most egregious. I mean, the most severe. It's like capital murder of offenses as far as the NCAA is concerned. Well, not quite, but you understand. So literally, there was like no wiggle room. They broke the cardinal rule of coaches paying players to come play at the university. And if you want to compare that to, what USC, and this is why I'm kind of showing a little bit of anger. If you want to compare that to what USC got sanctioned for, remember, this is the Reggie Bush scandal. You would literally think that the Volunteers football program was about to be buried. I mean, buried 6 feet deep in sanctions, way on top of Rocky Top. Nope, not the case. Instead, as I said at the top of the show, the Trojan family, they're forced to accept that it is still okay to cheat if you go to a school or if you're a school in the Southeastern Conference. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Because, look, I really do. I hate sounding cliche and saying that art imitates life. However, there does tend to be a double standard going on for certain groups. I mean, USC commits a crime, they're given just short of the death penalty. And if you don't believe me, I got 8 million examples why that I can prove my point. So please, someone, tell me, where's the deterrent from the NCAA? How do you expect folks like myself, most folks who are born with common sense, to believe that an organization, the NCAA, and its leaders aren't corrupt when they allow, seriously, major crimes to be committed without any significant consequences? And when I say art imitates life, I'm sure if you turn on the news every now and then, you'll understand the point I'm making. It seems like you can get away with a lot, and there aren't going to be any consequences. Quick review. If you remember what USC was sanctioned, when they were sanctioned, they were given a 2-year bowl ban because one football player's family was being induced to have that player leave USC, not come to USC, to leave USC. And they also had a tennis player, apparently, who was using the coach's office phone, calling overseas, which is a major no-no in the NCAA's eyes. And they alleged that Tim Floyd, USC's basketball coach at the time, was handing out envelopes full of cash payments. Well, he was exonerated of that. No truth was found of that. So, essentially, USC was given a 2-year bowl ban, a loss of 30 scholarships over a 3-year period. The NCAA said, you know what? Because Reggie Bush and USC and you guys were just so successful, we're going to even the playing field. This was the NCAA's idea. This was their way of, making sure the other programs can compete equally with USC, because they weren't able to do it when USC had the same amount of scholarships. This was the NCAA's way, a version of affirmative action. So let's compare the penalties. This is what Tennessee got from the NCAA. Instead of giving them a 2-year bowl ban, the NCAA said, we're going to fine you $8 million. And they were placed on 5 years probation. And they're going to lose 28 scholarships over the duration of their probation. So, you spread out the scholarships over 5 years. Not a big deal. Sounds reasonable, but when you start peeling back the layers, it's not going to affect Tennessee at all. Number one, Tennessee losing $8 million in 2 years is nothing. In fact, I think they have to pay that amount over the 5-year period. Again, not a big deal. I guarantee you there's boosters right now writing checks. That thing will be paid off before it's supposed to be paid off. To Tennessee, losing $8 million is nothing. It's like me losing $20. They just don't, I would notice $20 for a couple hours. It's about how long Tennessee would notice $8 million missing. But because the NCAA didn't want players to pay a penalty for something that they didn't do, they get to go to a bowl game. So again, Tennessee's going to make the money. Whatever money they make, they're going to give to the NCAA. Big frickin' deal, right? And as far as those scholarship limitations, you can field a pretty competitive team with 80 scholarship players, and you don't have to worry about developing high school recruits. The transfer portal is going to supplement that issue. Yeah. Again, so USC, literally, I remember when the transfer portal didn't exist. And those of you might remember when USC traveled to South Bend one year, they had, 65 scholarship players available? There was a joke running that George Katrib was USC's fastest guy on the roster on that trip. George Katrib was a walk-on wide receiver. How ironic is it that the NCAA is essentially using what they did to USC, and that's the reason they're not levying those types of penalties to another football program? Think about that. Because back last year, in January, the NCAA decided they weren't going to punish players and coaches that weren't around when the violations took place. And they're doing that because they know their days are numbered. The NCAA knows that they are a dwindling, their power is fading. The courts have already said amateur athletes, the college athletes can earn money off their name, image, and likeness. Strike one. That was the biggest stranglehold that the NCAA had on the student athletes. Today, schools, what they do, if they think that the NCAA is going to be too strict with their rulings, what they do is they fight back and they threaten the NCAA with lawsuits. Strike two. And the message on the streets is loud and clear. Like I mentioned about strike two, Miami, Tennessee, other universities, they threatened the NCAA. Said, go ahead, give us your best shot. We'll see you in court. All of a sudden, the NCAA doesn't take their best shot. They pull their punches. It's probably because they don't want any more bad publicity. When you go to court, all of a sudden you find out stuff like, oh, they're paying a settlement to Todd McNair. So those 8 million reasons are what they end up paying when they end up going to court. Those 8 million reasons are essentially the fine they gave to Tennessee. Look, I don't know if USC can ever get justice for what was done to them. But I think in order for just so the Trojan family can feel a little bit, the NCAA, they need to admit that they punished USC too harshly. They should reinstore those wins that were taken away. Put them back on the record books. Everybody knows who won the games. And as far as I'm concerned, USC, they need to put their 7th Heisman Trophy Award winner back inside Heritage Hall. Put the trophy back where it belongs because they've already paid the fine. It's time for USC to push back. What's the NCAA going to do? What are the hypocrites at the NCAA going to do? Fine USC? Look, I'm not going to hold my breath. I don't think USC is going to do that. But here's what I will say. Whoever takes over the athletic director's job, when that person is named, that person's first executive order needs to be putting Reggie's Heisman back inside Heritage Hall. Because I remember Mike Bohn, he said they were working on it. Well, he's gone now. And Trojans still don't even have a replacement named. And I'm not even sure who some of those finalists are. But the last time I checked, when USC went under their cone of silence, Lincoln Riley appeared. So we're going to hope for a similar type of result with the athletic director. It's either that or, look, at this point, nobody wants the job. When you want America's #1 sports book, I need you to head on over to FanDuel. Because baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on all the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Go ahead, take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball on FanDuel. Get 10 times your first bet. That's 10 times the amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. If you bet $20, you're going to land $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting everything from the money line, over, under. Who do you think is going to hit the first home run of the game? You go make that prop bet. And you know what's cool? You can do that all on an app that's safe, it's secure, and it's super, super easy to use. And the best part about FanDuel, they pay you instantly when you win. There is literally no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, I kind of, it wasn't really a rant. Well, it was a rant in that first segment. And we can talk. I want your comments. I would love to get your feedback on what USC should do in light of how the NCAA is kind of treating Tennessee with kid gloves compared to what they did to you, compared to USC. Give me your feedback. Because in fact, I'm wondering if it's going to come up at Pac-12 Media Day, which is at the end of this week. You can see on the rundown, USC, they're going to be first up at Pac-12 Media Day this Friday. And they're going to be going there with, head coach Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, Mason Cobb, no athletic director. There will be representatives from the university. Katie Ryan, sports information director, and I'm sure she'll have a team with her as well. So once Commissioner George Kliavkoff gets off the dais, around 9:20, USC takes the stage. Lincoln Riley first, and then about 30 minutes later, the USC players will start their Q&A. And then when USC is done, at that point, technically, I can actually leave, start heading back to California. I'm not going to do that, don't worry. Athletic directors, they're kind of there to schmooze and talk about their budgets and looking to the conference's future. We know that the Trojans' future is elsewhere. So I'm wondering, because of that, knowing that this is, USC's last year in the Pac-12, how much interest is there going to be from the media in USC? And I'm not talking about the local media who covers USC. I'm talking about the foreign media. I'm talking about the guys from, the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon. Is anybody from Utah? How much interest are they going to have in USC? Bay Area schools. You understand where I'm going. Basically, the regions that USC is saying, toodaloo, bye-bye, we're leaving. How much interest do they have? And, what are their questions going to be? I mean, obviously they're going to have some. I'm going to assume that, most of the questions for Lincoln Riley are going to be about last year. And you hate to call it a collapse, but, the way the season ended with 2 losses and the Cotton Bowl, the last 5 minutes, let's just be honest, that was a collapse. So maybe it is the right choice of words. And, how many times is he going to be, will Lincoln Riley be asked about his defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch? It's a fair question. I raised the question about Riley's choice to bring Mason Cobb along with Caleb Williams last week when it was announced. I believe that was on Friday's episode of Locked On USC. So you everydayers, you can remind everybody. And you should become an everyday viewer and listener. That way you can correct me when I'm wrong. And that's often. So again, I raised the question, why is Lincoln bringing Mason as opposed to a defender, one of the defensive players who was on the roster last year? Well, apparently the reason Riley is bringing Mason Cobb is because it started when he arrived on USC's campus. Riley said early on that Cobb, quote, has a unique fire about him regarding his leadership ability. Mason Cobb has had a huge impact on our spring. Without a doubt, you feel it when he's on the field. Those were Riley's comments after the spring game. One of USC's more recent commitments, defensive lineman David Papali, he said when he saw Mason Cobb on campus, quote, he's different. All right. So during spring camp, Mason understood the gravity of, him leaving Oklahoma State, where he was the man, coming to USC. He understood that all eyes are on him to get USC's linebacker unit looking like what USC's linebacker unit should look like. This is Mason's own words. It was really the presence I could bring to the defense Cobb said of the recruiting pitch to USC. They said there was a gap in the defense and someone needed to bring them together. So that's Mason Cobb's role. That's why Lincoln Riley is bringing him to the 2023 Pac-12 Media Day. Last year, it was Shane Lee. He could have brought Eric Gentry. He could have brought Caleb Bullock. He could have brought Shaw. He decided to bring over the guy who's going to be the glue. At least he's starting to feel like the glue to the defense. That physical presence. Not saying that there weren't other guys that weren't physically capable, but Lincoln Riley sent something. And you know what? Mason Cobb doesn't have to answer for last year. He's going to answer for what what he brings on the table and what he anticipates USC's defense looking like this year, not last year, because that's what they're there to talk about. We know what Caleb Williams is going to be asked about. He's going to get asked about the usual. Are you going to repeat as the Heisman Trophy? You know, what's it going to take? Yada, yada, yada. Is it playoffs or bust for you? Right? Really, these are just the mundane rhetorical questions that you know the answer to. I think it'll be interesting to find out if someone asks Caleb the question, should Miller have played in the conference championship game when Utah kind of figured it out, that he couldn't move around? You know, they'll ask Caleb, you know, his thoughts on potentially being the number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL in the next draft. You know, the usual typical questions that are going to be asked. So that's what's coming up for USC Pac-12 Media Day. It's this Friday. What questions, again, audience participation time, what questions would you like me to ask if I have the opportunity? Give me a question that you think I should ask Lincoln Riley. Give me a question that you want me to ask Caleb Williams and Mason Cobb. This is your time. And pretend you're an actual professional in the media. Don't give me some fanboy question. Make it a question that I can actually ask. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to your feedback. Let me know. All right, so in case I'm bored, I'm just kidding. Look, I'm going to stick around for Pac-12 Media Day. We have all week until Pac-12 Media Day. That's on Friday. So, again, I know I asked you to give me some questions for the USC camp, Lincoln Riley, Mason Cobb, Caleb Williams. Here are the players, here are the team, the coaches and players that are going to be representing each of the other programs. What questions should I have prepared for each of these guys? Like, for instance, Arizona, they're bringing head coach Jed Fish, quarterback Jaden DeLaura, and defense player Traden Stukes. I'll be honest, I don't know who Traden is. Probably not going to have a question for him. The question I'm going to have, or should I ask this question, what happened between you and wide receiver Dorian Singer? That's probably one of those, you're not going to get an answer, but I don't know. Be curious. Are you? Arizona State, their head coach, Kenny Dillingham, first year. He's bringing Kalen Conyers and Jordan Clark. Does anybody have any interest in Arizona State? Maybe ask their head coach what it's like to, barely be old enough to be the father of some of the players he's going to be coaching. He's a young head coach. I think he's like 35, 36 years old. Yikes. Cal, Coach Justin Wilcox, he's bringing along Matthew Cindric and linebacker Jackson Sermon. I don't know. You going to have an offense this year, Cal? Colorado, they're bringing Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and Deion Sanders. Interesting, the Pac-12 lists Coach Deion Sanders. I thought Deion wants to be referred to as Coach Prime. We'll see how that goes over. We know he was pretty particular about that. Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, he's bringing his grandfather at quarterback, Bo Nix, and defensive lineman Jeffrey Bassa. I think he plays lineman. I think he's a lineman. You got Oregon State, Anthony Gould, and on defense, Kaiton Oladapo, head coach Jonathan Smith. You know what's interesting about schools like Oregon State? Sometimes you'll see the players just sitting by themselves, and nobody's there to ask a question. These are times where I feel bad. So somebody, give me a question you want me to ask to Oregon State. Schools like Oregon State, Washington State, a lot of times, yeah, it's look, it's part of the reality. There's just not a lot of interest in Washington State, Oregon State. It's hard to recruit to those programs. Stanford, you got first-year head coach Troy Taylor. They're bringing wide receiver John Humphreys and on defense Tristan Sinclair. UCLA, they're bringing along Duke Clemens and I always get this name messed up, Laiatu Latu on defense. Man. USC, we know who they're bringing. Utah, you got Kyle Whittingham. You've got Cam Rising, Cole on quarterback, Cole Bishop, safety. You know Cam is going to have some words ready in case anybody asks him about USC and the ability and not knowing what it's like to lose to USC. And then Washington, you've got Michael Penix Jr., you have Edufuan Ulofoshio on defense and head coach Kalen DeBoer. And I mentioned Washington State a minute ago. They're bringing along quarterback Cameron Ward, linebacker Ron Stone Jr., and head coach Jake Dickert. Again, I really, just because I'm a nice guy most of the time, you feel bad when you see people just sitting behind a microphone and nobody's asking them a question. There's nothing more awkward and uncomfortable than sitting there and not have anything to say or anybody to talk to. Imagine me sitting here like this for like 5 or 10 minutes and not saying a word, kind of just looking around, hoping somebody wants to ask me a question. That's what it's like sometimes for some of these programs. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with, like I said, Arizona State, Washington State, Washington State, Oregon State. Those are the programs. I think Oregon State will have a little bit more, interest because some people are actually picking them to challenge for the conference this year. Jonathan Smith has a system and it works. And if you remember last year, his team probably played USC tougher than anybody else, at least defensively. So there you go. First episode of Locked On USC for this week is in the books. We are anticipating a couple of commitments. One this Friday. Taylor Tatum, running back from Texas, is going to choose between USC and Oklahoma. He'll be making his announcement on the 21st, the same day as Pac-12 Media Day. And then 2 days later, Kingston Viliamu-Asa, linebacker, St. John Bosco. Will he pick USC? Will he pick Notre Dame? Will he pick Ohio State? Those are the finalists. What do you think? Right now, crystal balls, the feeling isn't leaning USC. I'll keep you updated. If you want to keep updated when you're done making Locked On USC your first listen every day, make sure you head on over to wearesc.com because that's where you're going to find me. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.